Breaking. Britain has been thrown into a constitutional firestorm. Unlike anything seen in modern history, just hours ago, King Charles shocked the entire nation by blocking Keir Starmer's flagship electoral reform bill, invoking a royal power untouched for nearly half a century. Westminster didn't just react, it erupted. MPs shouting across the chamber, cabinet ministers fleeing Downing Street, financial markets trembling, and rumours swirling that this could become the biggest political crisis since 1688, when a king last collided with the will of Parliament. What unfolded tonight wasn't politics. It was a collision of two centres of power, one elected, one ancient, and neither willing to blink. The chaos began when Starmer's controversial electoral modernisation bill, a piece of legislation critics say would rewrite Britain's democratic machinery forever, reached its final stage inside Parliament. Labour MPs were celebrating. They believed victory was minutes away. But then, just after 4 p.m, royal advisers delivered a message to Downing Street that hit like a thunderbolt. The king was refusing royal assent. Not delaying, not questioning, refusing outright. A constitutional kill switch that slammed down with royal certainty. Witnesses in Parliament say the reaction was instant, visceral, and unlike anything Britain has seen in decades. Labour benches fell into stunned silence while Conservative MPs burst into applause so fierce it echoed like cannon fire across the chamber. Moments later, the fury exploded. Shouting matches broke out across the floor. Senior MPs stormed out of the chamber in disbelief. Parliamentary staff tried and failed to restore order as the Deputy Speaker suspended proceedings. Reporters in the lobby spoke in hushed voices about a political detonation. What made this moment even more explosive was the whisper, spreading like wildfire, that the king had been preparing this intervention for weeks, consulting legal scholars, judges and constitutional historians who warned that Starmer's bill threatened to tilt the balance of power in ways the monarchy could not silently endorse. It wasn't a reaction. It was a decision, deliberate, calculated, historic. Inside Downing Street, panic ignited instantly. Advisors rushed through corridors, phones buzzed non-stop, and security officials sealed off entrances. According to insiders who were in the room, Starmer's reaction when he heard the news was nothing short of volcanic. One witness claims he slammed his hands onto the table, furious, pacing the room like a man betrayed not by politics, but by history itself. His words, now leaked across Westminster, paint a picture of a Prime Minister spiralling. And what he allegedly said about the king has already set off a moral earthquake inside his own party. Cabinet members have described the mood in Number 10 as funeral-like, with ministers refusing eye contact, aides whispering about contingency plans, and rumours of mass resignations spreading like smoke under a closed door outside Westminster. The public reaction was instant and electric. Within minutes, social media platforms exploded with fury, celebration, shock, and disbelief. Hashtags supporting the king surged to the top of global trends, while others accused the monarchy of overreach. Crowds gathered outside Downing Street, half cheering, half jeering, creating a scene that looked less like modern Britain and more like a nation staring into a historical mirror it never expected to face again. The question now consuming every newsroom, every living room, every political office is chilling in its simplicity. What happens when a modern democracy collides with the ancient authority designed to protect it? And here's where the crisis deepens. Because sources inside the palace claim the king didn't just reject the bill, he prepared a statement, one that would be broadcast directly to the British people, something no monarch has done in decades. And the moment he steps in front of those cameras, the legitimacy of this government may never recover. But the real question, the one tearing Westminster apart tonight, is far more dangerous. If the king has taken his stand, what will Starmer do next? Will he fight the monarchy? Will he resign? Or will Britain be pushed into a constitutional showdown unseen in 300 years? What happens now? What unfolded after the king's intervention sent Britain spiralling into a political freefall so fast and so violent that even veteran analysts admitted they had never seen anything like it. By nightfall, the government was not simply shaken, it was fracturing from within. Inside Number 10, senior advisors were speaking in whispers, terrified that anything they said might leak within minutes, and they were right to fear it, because even as Labour strategists tried to hide the truth, the first resignation landed with the force of a sledgehammer. The Home Secretary walked out, publicly declaring she could not serve in a government that had lost respect for Britain's constitutional heritage. Her departure ignited a chain reaction. 3 more cabinet ministers followed within an hour, each letter dripping with quiet condemnation, each statement hinting at the leader who had crossed a line no Prime Minister should ever dare approach. One insider described it bluntly. The government is collapsing from the top down. Meanwhile, inside the palace, the King's advisors were reportedly preparing for a second wave of public outrage. They feared civil unrest. They feared violent protests. But above all, they feared something deeper, a crisis of legitimacy. Sources close to royal officials claim the king was deeply troubled by the political flames erupting across the country, aware that his decision had torn open a wound at the heart of Britain's identity. Yet he stood firm, convinced he had acted to protect the stability of the realm. As the night deepened, senior judges, former prime ministers and constitutional scholars began issuing statements of cautious support, warning that the blocked bill represented a dangerous distortion of democratic safeguards. Suddenly, what Starmer had called progress began to sound in the public ear like something far more sinister. In the streets, the divide grew more violent. With every passing hour, crowds gathered outside Parliament, some waving Union Jacks and singing the national anthem, others chanting that the monarchy was outdated, undemocratic, and needed to be brought down. Police lined the streets in riot gear as tension crackled through the air like static before a lightning strike. In cities across the Midlands and the North, people who once voted Labour their entire lives were now turning, saying the king had done what no politician dared do: draw a line in the sand. In working-class pubs, in crowded buses, in late-night corner shops, conversations circled around one terrifying question. Had the government tried to go too far? But inside Labour headquarters, panic was turning into desperation. Leaked emails that revealed frantic discussions about emergency spin campaigns, coordinated media statements and attempts to shift blame onto misunderstood advisors, incorrect reports and constitutional ambiguity. None of it worked. The public had already made up its mind. Trust had evaporated. And then came the leak that tore the last shreds of stability away. Confidential documents reportedly drafted weeks earlier revealed that Starmer's inner circle had anticipated the king's refusal and seen it as an opportunity, a chance to argue publicly that the monarchy had overstepped, that ancient traditions needed dismantling, that Britain must evolve beyond hereditary influence. The optics were catastrophic. It looked less like a government surprised by a constitutional conflict and more like a government engineering it. As this revelation ricocheted across the country, the pound plunged. Global markets panicked and foreign leaders issued statements that were polite in tone but brutal in implication. Britain, once respected as a model of stability, now looked like a nation cracking under the weight of its own institutions. Even long-time allies whispered concerns about a constitutional meltdown. Political commentators described the moment as the most dangerous fracture between Crown and government since the Glorious Revolution. And within Labour circles, MPs were now openly debating whether removing Starmer was the only way to prevent total annihilation. The WhatsApp groups, once buzzing with victory plans, had transformed into digital war rooms filled with accusations, fear and thinly veiled leadership bids. Yet the most shocking moment of the night came just after 11 p.m, when a senior cabinet insider, visibly shaken, told reporters that Starmer had retreated to his study, refusing calls, refusing briefings, refusing advice. According to this source, he sat alone, staring at polling numbers, muttering that history would vindicate him. But history was already being written without him and against him. Outside, chants grew louder. Inside, loyalties crumbled. And the clock ticked toward a dawn that could change Britain forever, because the next move, the one no one expected, was already being prepared behind closed doors. Would Starmer fight back and escalate the crisis? Would Labour MPs unite to remove him before sunrise? What began as a legislative dispute had mutated into a national reckoning. Westminster was no longer just divided, it was unstable, trembling like a structure built on cracked foundations. As the sun rose over London, exhausted journalists gathered outside Downing Street, waiting for a statement that never came. Curtains remained shut. Officials slipped in and out of side entrances. The Prime Minister's car stayed motionless. For the first time since taking office, Keir Starmer had vanished from public view, and in the silence, the country's anxiety grew louder than any speech he could have delivered. Meanwhile, inside Buckingham Palace, the King's advisers were preparing for another potential address, aware that the government's paralysis had left the nation without direction. Royal officials insisted the King did not seek confrontation, but the truth was obvious. The monarchy had become the only functioning centre of authority. In a rapidly crumbling political landscape, newspapers published emergency editions with headlines usually reserved for wartime. Broadcasters cancelled regular programming. Analysts warned that unless decisive action was taken within hours, Britain faced the real possibility of a constitutional breakdown so deep it could redraw the entire political order. And then, just as Westminster braced for Starmer's eventual statement, another shock hit the system with the force of a political earthquake. A leaked audio recording, allegedly captured during the previous night's crisis meeting, surfaced anonymously online. In it, senior Labour figures could be heard arguing, shouting, panicking, and in the background, a chilling sentence believed to be Starmer's voice echoed clearly enough to ignite a storm. "If the King wants a fight, then he'll have one." The clip spread across social media like wildfire. Within minutes, it had millions of views. Within an hour, MPs were demanding immediate clarification. Within 2 hours, a crowd gathered outside Number 10, chanting for Starmer's resignation. Labour MPs, already shaken, now face the impossible. Supporters of the Prime Minister insisted the recording was taken out of context. Critics argued it revealed a man willing to drag the country into a constitutional confrontation out of wounded pride. But what truly terrified Westminster was the response from the palace. For the first time in decades, a royal spokesperson issued a stern statement emphasising the King's commitment to national unity and constitutional stability. A phrase so pointed, so razor-sharp, that every political insider understood its meaning. Inside Number 10, panic had collapsed into paralysis. Senior ministers debated whether they could force the Prime Minister out without triggering a complete implosion. Allies begged Starmer to make a public appearance. Opponents whispered that the longer he stayed silent, the more irreversible the damage became. Meanwhile, the opposition parties prepared emergency motions of no confidence, drafting statements that could bring down the government before the week was over. The final blow came when one of Starmer's most loyal cabinet members walked out onto Downing Street, faced the cameras, and declared that the government had lost the confidence of the people, the Parliament, and the Crown. Her words rippled through the country. Reporters gasped. Protesters erupted. The pound plunged again. And inside Number 10, Starmer finally rose from his chair, ordered his staff to prepare a broadcast, and began rehearsing a speech that could define or destroy his legacy. Because now, Britain stands at a crossroads darker than anything seen since the 17th century, a moment where one wrong word could tilt the entire nation into political freefall. Will Starmer resign before Parliament forces him out? Will the King intervene again if the crisis deepens? And is Britain witnessing the fall of a government or the rebirth of a constitutional order that refuses to die?